Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Cahokia Archaeological Society. We meet here at the Collinsville Library on the third Thursday of each month. The business meeting at 5:30 and the presentations programs at 6:30. Open to the public, so anytime you feel like coming and enjoying our programs, please do so. Tonight we have Steve Boles, who is a archaeologist with the Illinois State Archaeological Survey, stationed in the American Bottom branch here in Collinsville. And he's been involved in archaeology for years. He started out as a kid collecting arrowheads and wanted to be an archaeologist, but life got in the way. And it wasn't until he was, 40?
Yeah.
40 years old that he finally got to go to college to get his degree, got his master's degree in anthropology and archaeology, and has been involved with excavations throughout much of southern Illinois for a number of years. And he was heavily involved in the East St. Louis excavation project for the new bridge route going over the river, and he was the editor of this volume, East St. Louis Precinct, Terminal, Lake Woodland, and Mississippian Lithics. His specialty is primarily lithics, but he has a lot of others as well. And tonight he'll be giving a presentation on uncommon, unusual, and otherworldly groundstone objects from the Midwest. So, Steve, you're on.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you all for coming, and hopefully we'll see some things tonight that most of you haven't seen. Of course, Larry's seen my talk before, so he don't count. So we'll just kind of dive into it. The first thing is what I call hand axes or woodworking tools. So the ones in this picture are ones that I found growing up. I grew up over by Mount Vernon, about 70 miles east of here, in the middle of nowhere. And so walking fields as a kid was about the only thing we could do for fun. And a friend of mine actually found the first one, and he noticed it had this, it was like a fractured cobble, and it had a sharp edge, but it was dull from use. And so then we started looking for them, and I've picked up maybe 14 or so of these, and he's found about the same. And I brought examples of these. I'm going to pass a couple of these around so you all can examine what I'm talking about, so otherwise the pictures aren't going to look too exciting. And really these things are just, there's not much work put into these, most of them. They're just a fractured cobble. It's got a sharp edge. Maybe they straighten the edge out. In some cases it's irregular, but the wear on these is just like you would see on a groundstone axe set or celt. And so, all of the ones I found came from multi-component sites that had everything from early archaic to Mississippian. So when you find something on the surface in a field like that, you have no idea who made it. And so there's still a mystery, and I don't know, I wish I could tell you more, other than I did do some experimentation. I took a fractured piece of basalt, and I thought, well, can you chop a tree down with this? And I wasn't very optimistic, so I started out with just a branch on a dead tree, and it works. It's a little rough on the hands and the arm because your arm is in essence the handle, and it has to take all that shock from when you hit something hard. But it would cut, and I didn't do anything to this. It's just a fractured piece of basalt, so I didn't try to make an edge to it or anything else. Now, well, maybe this is better as a, stripping bark or planing wood, carving wood or something. And so it works for that as well. The only problem is, and I hate to say this, but it fits in your hand pretty well. Right-handed, left-handed, doesn't matter. Anyway, say you're stripping bark. Well, as you're stripping the bark, it's coming up this way. And it's kind of a self-torture device because the bark's going right under your fingertips. So you almost need to wrap your hands in a glove or something to keep the bark from doing that. But other than that, it works pretty well. Now, I could see these being the first axes, so to speak, where necessities of mother of invention. You need to chop a tree down. What do? You take a rock with a sharp edge and you start whacking at it, and it works. Eventually somebody figures out, well, if you peck a groove around that and you could put a handle on it, it'd be a whole lot easier on your hand. So maybe these things are, maybe they're the first hand axes, or maybe they're just an occasional expedient tool that when you don't have your axe handy, you can use that and it works. But I've recorded a lot of collections. I've been in a lot of collectors' homes and looked at their collections, and I have yet to walk into somebody's house and they have one of these. So they're just, I think they're pretty uncommon, but again, most people could walk right past these in a field and never pick them up because they just look like a broken rock. So they might be more common than I think. They're just unrecognized.
Could you point out the edges on all those, Steve?
Yeah, so this is the cutting edge here, and this is the same piece in 3 different views. So the bottom is flat. It has kind of a, I don't know, maybe a 45-degree angle. Now this one, and it's one that's being passed around. It is more evenly tapered to the bit, like you would see on an axe head. And so that one, yeah, that one there, they may have put a little more effort into, and that would maybe work better for actually cutting, whereas the other ones might be better for stripping bark or shaping handles. But this is the cutting edge on this one, and you can see the polish over the fractured surface. This is all polished from use. Same there. So, and these will be up here at the end if you guys want to look at some more examples.
Down.
What's that?
The down button.
Down button. Am I pointing at the computer or the screen?
The computer.
Okay. There we go. Okay, now we're cooking. Okay. So the next one, and I've got some examples of these up here too. Greg Perino, most of you know, he grew up here in Belleville, a self-taught archaeologist, worked at Cahokia a bunch, up the Illinois River Valley, and eventually ended up down in Oklahoma working on Caddo sites down there for Thomas Gilcrease. He wrote about these. He called them edge preparation tools, and all of these grooves in these rocks are from grinding the edge of a biface to set up a platform. So if you don't grind the edge of a point that you're trying to make, when you strike it with an antler, that edge is just going to flake off and it's just going to crush it. So you've got to build it up. You've got to thicken it and build up a platform before you strike it. And so in all those grooves, I'll pass some of these around too. That is just wear from grinding those edges of bifaces. And everybody would have had these, but I think these ones that are really heavily used like this, these were probably in master knappers toolkits, guys that really made points not just for themselves, but maybe for the whole group. Maybe they didn't like to hunt, so they traded points for food. So these guys are the artists, the napper artist guys. And again, these are really uncommon. In all the years of looking for arrowheads, I never found one that was dished out like these are. So, and there's plenty of examples up here. I'll go back one. This one here in the middle, that's just a celt, a woodland celt. The blade got dull. It got small on them, and rather than recycle or resharpen it, I think they decided to turn it into a knapping tool, and I'll pass that one around too. So they just kind of recycled it into something else. So the next thing is modified pebbles, otherwise known as medicine stones. So this is the otherworldly aspect of the talk. Brad Koldehoff, who used to be our coordinator at the field station, and also from Millstadt, a local guy. And Julie Bukowski, she was our bioarchaeologist that took care of the burials that we encountered. And I think this was, 2007. They had a burial down at Fish Lake in Monroe County. And it was, this individual had a chronic infected leg bone, and it had these pebbles on either side of that infected leg. And so the medicine stone kind of came from that, even though it has no medicinal purposes other than in your head, I guess. So, but most of these, and the two they found at Fish Lake, have these little notched, just a little crease on the edge. And some of them are shaped, but they don't have that little tick mark, but most of them have a tick mark on the edge. And it's not in a place that would facilitate tying it on. You would want that in the middle, not on the edge. So it makes no sense in a utilitarian way. But just a random tick mark, but it's seen over and over. And since they found those, there's been a half a dozen more from the area, and some of these came out of Lake Woodland pits. And so they're not all in burials, but some of them are. And so they figured maybe these were shamans' tools, or, shaman stones, something imbued with magic that's supposed to help heal you. It's kind of like the placebo. Wrap this around your leg, you'll be all right. I don't know. There's another one. And that one's got a deeper notch than most of them. Most of them, you can just barely see the crease. And the interesting thing is, the burial was Lake Woodland. The pits that they've been found in are Lake Woodland. And going back through some old journals, I came across this group. And this group is from Adams County up by Quincy. And this was in a collector, his collection, Tom Browner, had assembled this group. And he called them early Lake Woodland burial wafers. The unknown specimens, all are finely grooved and polished. Many display shallow depressions on each face. All known specimens came from Adams, Hancock County, Illinois. 3 were discovered on the foreheads of male cremated burials, but again, in Lake Woodland context. So it's not just an American bottom thing. It seems to be more widespread, but amongst Lake Woodland groups. And some of them are slate, some of them are basalt, some of them are quartzite. But here's the article that he wrote about them back in the 70s. So people have known about them for a while, but they're still relatively unknown. And anybody walking the field, I know guys that won't been down to pick up a broken point. They've only been down to pick up something they see that's complete. So I could see where most people wouldn't even recognize these things, or if you picked it up, never noticed the little notch and throw it back down. I wonder how many archaeologists have looked at it and just put them in a pile and counted and weighed them as pebbles and went on, They could be so easily missed. So they might be more common than we know. Hard to say. I know we're writing up the Janie B. Good site, which is just about a mile north of the St. Louis site. And we've got, I think, 16 of these from our sample. And we have some in Mississippian features, but I don't know that Mississippians continued this tradition, or if the ones we have in Mississippian features were a result of admixture, because the site's multi-component and there is Lake Woodland out there as well. So we need to get them in solid Mississippian context before I'd say that continues. And you can see the depressions in the middle of that one, and I don't know if you can, and this one has 2 tick marks. That's the only one I've seen with 2 creases there, which is fascinating that whatever that represents, it is something they're all doing. And these are the ones from Adams and Hancock counties, so it's not just a local thing. And this is engraved pebbles, Pat Humphrey, again up by Quincy, just river pebbles that have been shaped, and some of them have been engraved. The one on the left is out of Cannel Coal, and that one's from Massac County, and a collection down there. And looks a lot like the Braden style artwork that we see on the shell cups and so forth. Oh, going the wrong way. So engraved images. This is part of a Catlinite disc pipe, and it's just part of the, I should have put a picture in there. They'll have a round top on them that's flat, and the stem is underneath it that comes back towards the smoker. And these pipes are often engraved with this one. And I was with a friend of mine when he found this one down in St. Clair County. He's got an Oneota site. These are late. They start after Mississippian, so somewhere in the 1500s maybe, and all the way up into the contact period, and they're trading with the French traders and so forth. But what's interesting is this image. This is the leg and the talon, and this is, so it's a human bird man image, kind of like the Cahokia tablet. This is his arm, and he's got 3 feathers hanging down, a little triangular emblem on his chest, which is fairly common. And this vessel behind it is very similar with the 3 feathers coming down. And that vessel was recovered at the Slack site in Union County, Kentucky. And I was talking to David Dye about that, who's an archaeologist down in Tennessee. And he said, well, that vessel is a lower Mississippi Valley vessel. So it's not even local to where it was found. So it's a non-local vessel with an engraving that stems from the Oneota culture, which originates to the north and west. So these lake groups are all sharing the same sort of iconography, and the Catlinite disc pipes also are widespread. They're found down the lower Mississippi. They're found up the Ohio on Caburn. They call it Caburn-Welborn over there. We call it Oneota in Illinois and Wisconsin, Iowa, Missouri. But just something different. This is some more images. This is from a 1966 or 7 article in the Plains Anthropologist. And I think most of these were from a famous Oneota site called the Ute site, UTZ, in Saline County, Missouri. And again, you get a lot of these, the imagery is not as refined. It's fairly abstract, but here's kind of a bird, human figure. A lot of it's kind of scratchy stick figure type stuff, but this is the bowl off of one of those pipes. It's all engraved. And this tablet, it's hard to see the imagery in this in a picture, but that's the sketch of it from 1967. Since I record a lot of collections and work with the collecting community, these guys keep me going down rabbit holes, because they'll buy a collection, they'll come up with some oddball thing, and I'll run into them and they'll be like, "Here, you're an archaeologist, do something with this." It's like, okay. And a friend of mine gave me this tablet, and it had a tag on it that said Magri tablet. Okay, well, this is odd. And so I Googled it, and this article came up because Frank Magri, who was, you guys probably, did you all know him from Missouri? He was a rock art specialist, and apparently he had this tablet at one point, and he had gotten it from the finder, a guy by the name of C.E. Weck. He called it the Weck stone, and it's mentioned in the article. And the guy found it where the Merrimack joins the Mississippi back in 1889 or something like that, way back in the day. And according to Phil Betancourt, was the guy that wrote this article, he thought that this image right here was a buffalo. Now, I don't know about that, maybe. I looked it up. Well, so here's your buffalo, and look where the horn is. It's in behind the eye and in the middle of the head. And this is a big horned sheep, Rocky Mountain sheep, and the horn comes off the forehead. So I think that's a big horned sheep, not a buffalo. So Phil thought that this was a Mississippian engraving, and I thought it was more of an Oneota type engraving. If it's Mississippian, it would be one thing for them to engrave a buffalo, because that's something they would have seen on this side of the river occasionally at that time. And we have buffalo, bison bones in excavations. We had some at Janie B. Good. We had some at East St. Louis. But those are probably more trade items rather than an actual representing a kill of a buffalo on the east side of the Mississippi. But anyway, just something I thought was kind of unusual. And but the other side of this tablet, has these hands, and that's one of the things that Phil thought was more of a Mississippian marker, because you see that in the rock art. This is in Monroe County. This is in Jackson County at the Whetstone Shelter. And so the arm and hands does look like Mississippian iconography. So maybe it's a mix, and if it is Mississippian, then some Mississippian surely had to have traveled out to the Rocky Mountains to know what a bighorn sheep looks like to have engraved one on the tablet, which makes for an interesting story in itself. Either which way you go, but just kind of a neat and unusual thing, and just looking at iconography and something that might be imbued with otherworldly significance, which we can just surmise at. I'll go back to the other side. This one's really busy. There's a bird image up here. There's a bird there. This is like a long neck of like a crane or something. This is an upside down. Here's the eye and the nose. This is like a human bird thing. Here's another bird with its beak opened. So they're usually pretty busy and a lot going on. But we don't see them over here too much. So.
What do you think that rocket ship on the left side?
Yeah, you tell me. I don't know.
Snake?
Yeah, it's hard to say what that's supposed to. It's got the swirl at the bottom and.
Maybe the head.
Yeah, I don't know.
Snake on the tree?
Yeah. Oh, going the wrong way again. Okay. So one of the other things that stone objects that we rarely see. So most of our digging tools are made out of Mill Creek and Kaolin and Burlington to a lesser degree. Occasionally you'll see a spade or hoe made out of basalt or quartzite. This is a Greg Perino article. These are quartzite, I think, from Arkansas. We had two at East St. Louis, one out of rhyolite and one out of basalt. But I see these occasionally in collections, and some of them are local. They're not all, like the Arkansas and the quartzite, which is what this one is. But this is limestone. Of course, we see that in like late Woodland Patrick phase stuff. But that's a basalt one. That one's from Butler County, Missouri. And, some of them are fairly hefty, and of course, they're dense material, so they're really heavy for their size. I wondered if they had a special purpose. If you're busting sod for the first time on the prairie or something, maybe you want something that were gravity, kind of like the big Larry's Big Mama theory, where you're using that for a special purpose. It's not something you chop a tree down with, but so maybe these had a special purpose, or maybe they would have taken more time to make. Don't you think, Larry, than a chert one would? So the fact that you're going to extra effort, why do you do that? Unless it is for a special purpose, I don't know. Another question, another rabbit hole. I've got so many rabbit holes I'm never going to get out. Another Greg Perino article where he talks about these club heads. And a lot of people think these are like some form of plummet, but Greg thought they were actually club heads. There's different styles. And again, these aren't common things, but they're out there. Greg actually had this one, and it was from I think up by Fulton County or something. And since then, I've seen two more made exactly like it. I thought his was just a one of a kind, but apparently it was a form that was made to some extent over time. Other things that we see in this part of the area is stuff that comes from the Poverty Point culture. It's a late archaic culture down in Louisiana. I've been down to the site a few times. Has anybody been there to Poverty Point? Okay, a bunch of people, great. Pretty impressive. The big mound in the back, the first time I was there was covered in trees. I've been back since then and all the trees are off, and that thing is huge. That's a really big mound. I couldn't take it in the first time with the trees on it, but with the trees off, I think it's 75 foot tall. It's a big mound. And these concentric rings of earth, the place has been farmed had been farmed for a long time. When I first went there in the 90s, this section over here was still being farmed, and the rest of this was park. But anyway, they think maybe they lived on these concentric rings, where their huts was and so forth. But in the museum, well, this is another, I'll just give you another idea. And this is the big mound in back with the trees off of it. It's really a neat place. And the archaeologist at the time, Dennis LeBlatt, he was from Illinois, LaSalle County, I think. And he married a Louisiana girl and ended up down there. But he was a super nice guy. And so he gave me and my friend a tour, and we're talking and going through the museum. And I'll get to some more pictures. But these are Poverty Point objects. They're just clay, molded clay. And they think they were using them. They don't have any stone material down there, so they think they were using these for heating purposes, either cooking. And that field that I told you was farmed at the time, he took us out there, and on the surface, there was just a billion of these things all broken up, just covering the ground like gravel, like a gravel road. So these things they're everywhere. But these have been found up here. Greg Perino had a site at Damiensville that he found a cache of these biconical Poverty Point objects. And we will occasionally find a Poverty Point bead made out of jasper. We've got one right now from Janie B. Good that came out of a Mississippian feature, and it's just a classic jasper Poverty Point bead that they found and ended up in their stuff. Some of the zoomorphic images get pretty out there. These little owls are interesting. I did my thesis on Mississippian use of fluorite along the lower Ohio, and they made all kinds of beads, a lot of geometric beads, but there was two effigy types that they made quite consistently, and one was the owl and the other was human heads. And the owls were all done the same way. They had the hole through the neck, which is often where they broke, and these little pop bellies. And so I don't know if that's a fertility symbol or what, but a lot of them, some of them have really distended abdomens, like they're carrying, triplets or something. But at Cahokia, Titterington had a few of these that he pictures in his book, and they're made out of clay. And I've seen the head of one from the Ramey track that Harry Johnson had that was out of fluorite that he found back in the 50s or 60s. So you see these occasionally up here, but of course they're later. But it's just interesting that for 2,000 or 3,000 years they're making these little owl pendants, and they're making them the same way, just different materials. Poverty Point figurines, not the most well made things. Kind of look like the Venus figurines from the old world, but there's a handful of those. I haven't seen any of those up here, but what I have seen, now let's get past these for a second. Out of the Missouri Boot Hill in southern Illinois, I've seen about a half a dozen of these, and they're all made out of sandstone. And again, I don't know if they're poverty point. I suspect they probably are. I'm not real sure. But they have what looks like, talons for a bird feet, maybe something to emulate wings or signify wings. This one, of course, this one has more of a human face, but, they're kind of a mix between human bird imagery. So this was out of the point guide book we did 8 years ago. Hate it when time flies so fast. So these are all poverty point type objects that have been found in southern Illinois. This is a bead I found in Jefferson County. I found that one in Jefferson County. A friend of mine found the other ones in Jefferson County. The poverty point plummet with the grooved and drilled neck, that was found in St. Clair County, Clinton County, Jefferson County. And then motley points are associated with poverty point, and we see those up here too.
Sir?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was the dates of poverty point?
They're a terminal late archaic, so they're probably around 2000 BC, somewhere in that range, 1800. Yeah. Oh, so the thing I was going to tell you, so in that museum, when Dennis was taking it through there, all these points and stuff, and there was a Cobden motley point, or a motley point made out of Cobden. I said, oh, that's Cobden from my neck of the woods. And he said, are you sure? And I said, oh, yeah, it's very distinctive. I know that's Cobden. Okay, well, I'll make note of that. He said, down here, we're 100 miles from the nearest lithic source. There's no lithic material within 100 miles. So everything here made out of stone came from somewhere else. And so, given that we're finding evidence that these guys were in our neck of the woods, and then I'm seeing the chert from our area back down there, these guys are either trading or they're going on excursions to get material, lithic material. So that kind of explains how this stuff got up here, I guess. Or, if they're trading or what. But he had, there was one that looked like Burlington, and I mentioned that, and Dennis said, well, we've got on one of their digs, they had a feature that was just full of the crappiest white Burlington. He said somebody brought a whole dugout load of crappy Burlington down here and traded to these guys, and they couldn't do anything with it, So it's kind of interesting. Let's see here. I'll go back one. Oh, so plummets. This is probably, well, it is the best poverty point plummet that's ever been found. It was found in Indiana. And Dennis LeBlatt saw this in a collector journal, and he called me and he said, hey, are you familiar with this plummet? And somebody named Don Lewis owns it up in Flora. I said, oh yeah, I know Don Lewis. I've seen that plummet many times. He said, oh, that's the best poverty point plummet that's ever been found. And do you think he would let us, record it and so forth? And I said, well, I'm sure. Just, I'll get you guys hooked up together and you can get with him. But anyway, that's, it's got like an engraved armadillo. This is Pete Bostrom's work here, which for who Pete, that's his thing. So he pulled off the design just so you could see it better. But, anyway, these guys were getting around. There's some more plummets. Those are ones from the museum. This one here is made out of novaculite, this red and gray one there. That'd be hard to do, wouldn't it, Larry? So the other ones are made out of hematite.
Heat treated.
Yeah, it looks like it. Yeah. These guys were master stone workers, that's for sure. This little this little pendant here, a guy walked into the Collinsville show with that, and he said he found it down in Monroe County near the range site back in the 70s or whatever. So that's another piece from that neck of the woods that ended up here. So, and since we're on engraving, thought I'd bring in some discoidals. So Liz Castley, some of you know, she found this one just north of Fairview Heights, the mall up there. She found that one back in the 70s or 80s, a long time ago. And This is another one that a friend of mine came across. It was out of a collection from St. Clair, Madison County area, and it has that same sort of diamond-shaped eye in it, and that's the only two I've seen with that done like that. But engravings on discoidals, for whatever significance it had, it's not common. You'll see some, but not many. And if you see one that's engraved, you won't see the same engraving on both sides. If they're engraved on both sides, they'll be different. And I think that it may have had some otherworldly significance, but it also had something to do with gambling, I think, because that's what these things are for. These are gambling stones. And so it's kind of like heads up or tails up, whichever side it lands on. If it lands on the eye, it's this or the other. This is another one that's, got an engraving. This one down here has two rings around the outer edge. This one's got like a radiating thing. This one was painted. This is black pigment that's on this. It's kind of hard to see, but there's pink, red ochre around the edge of this. And those two have been burned. And that was something I noticed at East St. Louis. We had, I think, 15 complete discoidals, and we probably had 60 broken ones. And all of the broken ones, most of them were burned. And whenever these things get taken out of circulation, they're done in a ritual way. They're either broken or they're burned and broken. And out of 6,000 features that we excavated at East St. Louis, we never found two halves of anything that ever went together. So when they broke them and burned them, the other piece went somewhere else. So I just thought that was fascinating because it goes to show you that these things, whatever, there was some power with these things, and when they were taken out, and the engravings kind of go along with that thought, is that these are special. They're not just, not just toys or gaming stones, but they hold some significance. Now this is some pictures from East St. Louis, and this has that pink pigment up around the edge, so it was painted. And again, painted, but burned and broken. Now here's one that's engraved on both sides, but again, you can see the engravings are different. So, and that's really rare to see one that has engravings on both sides. You don't see that very often at all. So in terms of painted objects, this is, again, I stole this from Pete's website. Oh, that's on camera. Anyway, sorry, Pete. But you get the credit for it, Pete Bostrom. So this Ramey knife is from the Lloyd site, which is up 157. And Mary Vermillion did some work on that side, and she's the one that I think documented that these have been painted. Had some green pigment and some red or orangish pigment on them. So these things have been painted. And I wonder how many of them were painted and we just never noticed because, well, what do you do when you find something? You take it, you put it in a tub of water, and you get a toothbrush out, and you scrub all the dirt off of it and all the pigment, and you go, oh, isn't that pretty? And now we can label it. So, yeah, I wonder, I'll go back. So, in speaking of Ramey knives, and I didn't put a slide in here, but at East St. Louis, again, we had 4 complete Ramey knives, which I thought was pretty Spartan. I thought we would have a lot more than that. And we had 4 complete ones, but we had 40 or 50 broken ones. And again, we never had 2 pieces that went together. A lot of them were burned. So when these things are taken out of circulation, they're snapping them, burning them, and spreading them apart. They don't go in the same place. A lot of things seem to be that way. Discoidals, Ramey knives, pipes. We found a lot of broken pipes, but we never found spuds. Same way, we found a few broken spuds. Some of those were burned. So it seems to be a thing when some of these powerful objects that very few people have, when they get taken out, there's a right way to do it. Flint clay figurines. Let's see. I think I got a slide in here. So abraders, or I'll come back to these. So this here was in the first structure that I dug at East St. Louis. She was in a little shallow depression in the floor of the house. She was laying on a bed of red ochre, laying on her back, and she had to have been covered over because the house was torched with everything in it. And before the fuel completely burned up, they had to have covered it with sand, and they basically created an earth oven. And so the timbers were all, preserved, crisscrossing each other. The burnt posts were sticking upright out of the wall trenches. There was a woven basket in it that had a red cedar log in it. It was still just so well preserved. But by covering that burning embers up and creating an earth oven, it vitrified the sand floor hard as a rock for like 3 or 4 inches deep. I mean, it was just like brick coming down on it. So it was a hot fire, and they smothered it and kept it in. But I think if she hadn't have been, I think it was their intent that she was probably going to blow up into pieces, because most of these flint clay figurines, when they get heated, they're gonna fly apart. And she's intact, and she's one of the very few that remain intact. And she's small. She's only maybe not even 4 inches tall, and she's got a conch shell cup on her knees that she's kind of turned to the side like she's pouring liquid out of it. And pretty special. But most of these, like I said, they're broken and burned. The ones at Spooneman, I think they've got 3 tops and 2 bottoms, but the bottoms don't fit to the tops. So there may be 5 figurines or maybe 3 figurines, but they can't connect them. And I think there's 662 pieces that were found in 2 or 3 different features, and there's obviously missing pieces. So these things are broken, and some of them are, some pieces that fit together, one piece will be orange, one will be black, one will be red. So they were broken and then burned differentially. So some were really heated, some weren't burned at all. You wouldn't even think they would go together. And so, and again, they're scattering these things somewhere else. They don't all go together. There was a large flint clay owl pipe found up here at the Grossman site. And we have done reconstruction through digital mastery, wizardness. Somebody else did. I don't have those skills. But we figure we've got maybe 2/3 of it, and there's, I don't know, a couple thousand pieces. This thing was big. And the internal pieces are so fried and burned, they're gray and just real brittle. You wouldn't even think they were flint clay. So, well, they really heated it up after they broke it, and then where the rest of it went, because they excavated 100% of Grossman, and it's not there. So they're carting these things off somewhere. So abraders, these are from East St. Louis. Again, just, the pigments for painting things. So some of these will have red from hematite, grinding hematite. The white is from grinding galena. You mix them together, you get a pink. Limonite, you would get a yellow. Of course, charcoal, you would get a black pigment. And again, a lot of abraders that have been processed in our labs may have had pigment on it, but you got to get the dirt off, and to get the dirt off, you got to wash and scrub it. So in some instances, I'm sure we've scrubbed a lot of pigments off in the process. This was also found at East St. Louis. It had a bird-like image and a snake-like image going across it. This one also has that diamond-shaped eye. Here's your tablet fragment, Bill. Do you have that one in your group? I can't remember.
I do. I have a question about it for you afterwards.
Okay. This little tattooing kit, it's got little pockets where pigment was mixed, and then it's got slots on the sides where you would sharpen bone needles, probably a shaman's tattooing stone, if you will. Just a close-up of that one. Now this is also from East St. Louis, and this is another example of a broken flint clay figurine that we never found another piece of. And this one's been modified after it was broken. Somebody put ear-to-ear grin on it, ground the nose down, and did a little modification that came out of a wall trench. So I think that's it for the unusual stuff. Thank you. So, questions, comments? Yeah.
When you talk about the poverty point object,
Mm-hmm.
was the implication that they were produced when poverty point was at its apex, and so they were very old by the time they got up there? Is that the implication?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're whatever we find up here was made down there and then brought up. I don't think anybody up here is reproducing what they were making.
But poverty point was much earlier.
Yeah, it was much earlier. Yeah.
And so those would have been actual objects from
Oh yeah,
that country.
from Poverty Point. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now the clay balls is something. The Poverty Point objects is what they call them, PPOs. I guess you could. I mean, you could make that up here, but
Why?
yeah. They're and I found. I mean, they're around. I mean, you'll see them from time to time, but I don't know.
I mean, it's obvious why they needed them there.
Yeah, but up here it's just you're away from home, and there is stones in the creek that you could use for heating and cooking, and But you got people get stuck in their ways, right? This is the way we do it. It's the way we've always done it. We're just going to keep doing it that way.
Or it was something from if it's a pilgrimage site.
Oh, sure.
Then it was something that they wanted to keep.
Right. Well, that's true too. Yeah, it could have been somebody from up here that went down there to visit, and like you said, a pilgrimage, and they come back with a souvenir or something from the site that means something to them, or yeah.
In order to break that flint clay
Mm-hmm.
with fire, that had to be a hell of a fire.
It would. I think they break them first and then burn them. I think, because that's the whole point of
Okay, yeah.
the flint clay or fire clay. I mean, it's used in kilns, or right. It takes a lot of heat.
Some of those figurines from Spalding site,
Mm-hmm.
female figures that they glued back pieces
Right.
together.
Right.
They look like they exploded.
They do.
Depending how they landed, what face was up when you get dark or light colors. So I think some of it is just exploding in a fire.
Yeah. Could be after they were broken, maybe throwing broken pieces in that break further when they explode. Yeah. That's interesting. But I just find it interesting that you never find all of them.
Right.
I mean, they're definitely picking up pieces after they're burned and broken and taking some of them somewhere else. It's just like the discoidals and the Ramey knives, and where does all those pieces end up? I just speculation, but you think like with the gambling and the chunky stones or discoidals, at what point do they get broken? When you lose so many matches, somebody takes your chunky stone and breaks it. Here's your half so you can remember you got beat, and here's my half so I can remember I beat you, and I'm going to go back to my village now. And, so, yeah.
I think that's interesting, because why would you find them intact then? They never stop being in service? And what are they in a different context that you would find them? So, I mean, if they finish their life and they get broken, why are you finding whole ones?
Yeah, that's true. It's a good question. Well, I mean, some of these things you figure, they're stored in the house until you get ready to use it. Maybe you forget where you put it, or your 10-year-old gets a hold of it and loses it. I remember I hit tools out in my yard mowing, hear a clang clang, and there goes a socket wrench flying through the air, so, kids. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, you see some discoidals with burials, but not often. Of course, the ones that we found at East St. Louis just came out of, domestic context. I will say, I know, just thinking off the top of my head, we had 3 Cahokia style, and they were small, that were complete. One was sandstone, one limestone, and one basalt. And the limestone one and the basalt one, the cups on both sides were rough, like they were being pecked and re-smoothed or redone. So maybe they were something that was still being used and was in the process of being altered or something. I don't know. But yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question.
I have a question. It's kind of hard to answer sometimes. Description of the types of stone, like basalt,
Mhm.
diorite, and diabase, and
Gabbro, yeah.
What are some of the primary differences?
Okay, so you can get all those varieties from the St. Francis Mountain, the same area. You'll get porphyritic chunks of quartz in the basalt sometimes. What we call snowflake basalt. Like if you were to look at the celt caches, the Pearson cache, there was one of those. It was one of the big unfinished celts. It was just full of those quartz chunks. It's just the way this stuff is forming. So your basalt is typically homogeneous, except for the occasional porphyritic quartz chunk. Your diabase will have like linear crystals in it, and then your gabbro will have some olivine in it, so it will have some green chunks in it. So it's kind of the matrix of it. So basalt usually it's homogeneous, has no real features that jump out. Whereas the diabase and the gabbro will have different minerals or different crystals in them that change the effect. So yeah, it's kind of splitting hairs. I mean, you could call it all basalt and it wouldn't be necessarily wrong. Just basaltic rock. So it's kind of like Crescent Hills and Wood Grain Burlington and High Ridge Burlington and the Blue Burlington. It's all Burlington, but yeah. Or St. Genevieve root beer and Old Blue and yeah. So.
Root beer.
Yeah, the root beer. Yeah.
I was down on a tour. I don't remember the year, but they were digging across from where Cemetery Mound was on I-55. And they were digging on the west side. It was ISTAT, pretty sure. And they had a couple houses there, the base of a mound, and in the house was a basket with burned corn. There was a gigantic post hole just southeast of there before you made it to the highway. The highway was like up here, and from here to that bookcase away, and the sheer thing down to this giant post hole. There was a burned spade, about that big, but nothing else around. Well, there was 4 Kaolin 12 or
Cahokia points.
Cahokias that were really not very great, but they were there. But I wondered how that flaked apart Irimi knife or spade got there, because it was blown up, and it didn't look like there was anything around it that
was burned.
Yeah. And for some reason, when you were mentioning about the blown up stuff, that came into my mind. But it had to be something brought in, because there was no fire there, so you could do that. So why the bearing of something that's been burned. And that should be the other end of probably the north or southern end of your site. Right.
Yeah, the north and south side excavations. Yep. Yeah, it's interesting. There was at East St. Louis, we had a number of features that had what I call pair caches, where there would be maybe a hoe and a celt, or maybe 2 celts, or maybe an adze and a celt, but there was a lot of pairs, and they might be in house floors, or they might be in pits. Sometimes you would find just a singular object, like for instance, there was a hoe that was in the bottom of this pit, but the bottom part was backfilled with a sterile sand, and I was supervising this excavation block, and this one girl, she was new, she had just started. And, I could tell you could see the fill on the sides of the pit, and then you could see where it just looked like she was into this sterile sand this deep. And it's like, Nikki, you're far enough. Let me help you clean this wall up, and we'll get a photograph. And her wall was kind of a ski slope instead of the profile being nice and straight, so I was helping her straighten up the wall. And as I was going down, I hit this chink. that's weird. What's it doing? Why am I hitting something in sterile sand? Come down and hit it again. And there was this foot-long hole that was in the bottom of this pit. And they had buried it, and put sterile sand. And then there was fill above it that had charcoal and potsherds and everything else in it. But it was like they intentionally put it in clean soil and a good sized piece that was not like used up, right? But not intended to be seen again. And if she hadn't went this far below what looked, then it makes you wonder. It's like, well, how much stuff did we miss that? Where you thought, well, we're into the sterile, let's stop. So, yeah, the burger figurine, for those of you who know which one that is, the Doug Jackson. It's kind of a question whether Doug Jackson found it or Tom Emerson. It just depends on who you're talking to, who's telling the story. So Doug was field supervisor at that project. Tom Emerson's his boss, shows up, and they're walking around, and the belly scraper's going, and it's past where all the features are with the village, the houses, and the pits. It's past that point. So they quit watching the machine or walking around talking, and they come back around, and there's a burger figurine kind of kicked out into the side, and they said you could not tell that she was ever put into a pit in the ground, just like she was almost laid on top of the ground, and then they left it. Of course, I'm sure that it was buried, but they backfilled it with the same soil that came out, so it's clean, and couldn't tell there was a feature there. Had the belly scraper not uncovered it and they saw it, you would have never known that was there.
Or the next round with the belly scraper.
Yeah. Well, they thought that the belly scraper broke the back of the head off, and they apparently screened the dirt where they thought it had been dumped and never found it. So, but if the machine hit it, I would have thought it would have broke the head completely off. I almost wonder if that wasn't intentionally broken and put in there in that way, because they're always broken and burned, or to some degree. So, but anyway, things that weren't meant to be found. Yeah.
Is there any memory from any nations, cultures right now that talk about the breaking and the burning?
I mean, yeah, that's certainly fire is a purification.
Right.
It's a way to purify something. You burn it. We it's just like if you're gonna, it's just a needle. You put it under a lighter before you dig a splinter out. You purify it. You sterilize it. But yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. If I don't know of anything historically that was treated that way, but I do know. I'll take that back. There was Matt Colvin. He did his master's thesis on some of the female flint clays, and he had a Mandan Hidatsa example where women in the Goose Lake Society, who were in charge of tending the fields and so forth, they would make a figurine, and they would break it every season, smash it with a rock or something, and that's the only sort of analog to figurines and breakage that I know of. Didn't mention fire, but that's one example. So,
was there a reason passed down?
No. I wish.
Probably no.
Yeah.
They know, but they're not going to tell.
Well, that's true. Or there's just so many things that you wish they would have recorded. The early explorers and so forth. That just details they didn't. Like what's with the tick marks on those river-worn pebbles. It's just kind of crazy. But they did it, and they kept doing it, and they did it all over the place. So it meant something. It wasn't utilitarian. It had no practical purpose. So, yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.